Welcome to another ramble on accessibility, and in this case, calling this one, well, you saw the title, Calling a Spade a Spade. Now, what I want to preface this with is my usual intro, which is that I'm one person, I'm blind, and I don't speak for other disabled people, and that's really, really important in this context because I work with kids and I have a certain amount of expertise as a disabled person working with abled and disabled kids. Now, what I want to talk about is something that is probably going to catch me some slack or flack or whatever the term is by potential parents and maybe kids themselves. And I'm going to explain and justify my position in a moment. But what I want to talk about today is labeling a disability and being upfront with that label as you move through your support system and in your school career or your career in work or your career as a parent. And here we go. For me, this is really important. Calling a disability what it is challenging. I'm not going to sit here and be the first to say, well, I've never had any problems, because that's not true. I have been discriminated against. I have been not hired because of my disability. I have been denied opportunities within jobs because of my disability. I have been judged by coworkers and assumed to be less of a human being because of my disability. That's really hard. However, what I also have had happen to me is that I've had help given to me. That was the help that I needed. I have had people come to respect what a disability looks like and how to treat other people with disabilities. Because of my disability and my position and my ability to speak for myself, I have also now been able to bring some of this full circle to the point where I can help do the same for the kids I work with every day. And so what I want to talk about with labeling a disability is kind of twofold. And first is addressing that challenge. In our modern society, we have two wolves always fighting one another. And the first is this idea that everything is equal for everybody. We are tolerant. We are ready to accept you for who you are. And we're ready to work with you no matter what limitations you may have. And the second wolf is that we hate you, you are different, you are less than, and you don't matter. And part of where that second wolf gets its feeding, its fuel, is fear and confirmation bias. So if I, as a blind person, and this happened to me actually at my last job, this job that I'm working right now, at the place that I work, there had been another location elsewhere in the country that brought in a blind volunteer. The children that worked with this volunteer didn't take to them for whatever reason and took to pouring milk cartons on them during mealtime. Now, it was the only story that anybody at my location had heard of my job working with blind people. And so there was this trepidation, and I found this out later. I didn't know this, at the time. But I walked in saying, I'm blind, I had my cane with me, I did my interview, and I was offered the job on the spot. I don't know what every reason was behind my hiring, but by working there and by existing, I am now trying to push back against that narrative and prove that, hey, that might have happened for one person, but that's not because blind people can't do this job. That's because that situation may have not been the best for that volunteer, for the kids, or potentially the organization, or some combination thereof. It wasn't because he was blind that all of that happened, it's because the situation around him didn't allow him to be successful for whatever reason. And that's all I know. I don't know any other details about that, and I'm not going to pretend to. However, at this job, it took me months of speaking up, of advocating for myself, of trying to talk about the things that I need in order to do my job, for finally, after A story I'll get into another day. My program director and some of my staff finally started to understand some of the issues I was talking about and be more open to the organization itself, taking a stronger stance on accessibility, and then not only saying those words in a meeting, but ordering me materials in Braille so that I can run my own programs, and being open to some of the budget challenges that can occasionally come with. That took a lot of work, but the reason that was able to happen is because I walked in with my perspective, my story, and my label of being blind, and I wore that and said, hey, I am blind, these are the things that I need, and because I was able to speak for that, I was able to get help. And when you work with kids, that can look really different because they're younger, but to be honest, the situation is the same. I am working with a student right now who is undiagnosed, but definitely dyslexic. And I don't say this with any expertise. I say this with my work experience, my professional experience, and my understanding of the way that this student is reading and writing. And so by MacGyvering solutions on our own, based on my experiences with dyslexia, I was able to get them to a point where we can work through reading and writing in a way that works better for that student than it would if I didn't suspect and act on my suspicion that they had dyslexia. And I'm not here to say that now I can solve all problems or that I, figured out dyslexia, because I certainly have done neither of those things. But with that label attached, I'm now able to go as a professional and look for resources for this young person. And I'm able to say, hey, this is why your brain might be doing what it's doing. And if we do things like changing the contrast, changing the font, tell me what this looks like to you. Is this easier to read? In some cases, they said, yeah, I like that a lot better. In some cases, they said, not quite. And so we, by trial and error, figured out something that allows them to execute a public speaking gig that they have coming up. And what's really hard for me sometimes is when, whether it's parents, teachers, professionals, and even mentors or teachers in that child's own corner have this absolute fear and thus this unwillingness to label a disability or to even pursue the idea of getting a diagnosis or testing or things like that. And again, the thing that label gives you is, if I know that someone is blind, I have resources for that. If I walked into a room and someone handed me a book and said, well, this is my favorite part of this book, I want you to read this, it just means a lot to me and I'd like you to see it. And I were to say, sure. And I pick the book up and I hold it for an appropriate amount of time and maybe don't have my cane with me, that sort of thing, so they have no clue that I can't see. Close the book, put it down. That's very nice. Now, what if the passage in that book was about a child with leukemia and it was really sad and it meant something to that person because they lost someone close to them with leukemia who was a child? Now, I've just reacted to that wholly inappropriate way. But if I were to say, as part of maybe that workshop or that program, hey, I'm visually impaired, I'm blind, and I read best in Braille. Now that person who might want to share that passage with me can say, hey, I have this passage of this story and I'd like you to read it, and they hand me a sheet of Braille. Now I can read that passage, understand what they're saying, and say, wow, that's really impactful. Can you share with me why you really wanted to share that? And we can have that conversation about their experience instead of me looking like a moron. When you call a spade, when you label a disability, you are giving somebody access. You are opening doors, not closing them. Because by labeling a disability as what it is, not shying away from it, not living in fear on behalf of somebody else, you let that person live on behalf of themselves. And it's life-changing when the people around you start to accept that label in the same way that you do. For example, being blind. When I walk into a room at a new job or in a new experience, there is fear. There is a lot of the unknown. But after working with me for a while, I crack a joke or two, and I can show what I'm capable of with technology, with Braille. And over time, to my kids, I go from the blind teacher to my teacher because it's normalized. It's just there. I'm just blind in the same way that, someone might have any other set of skills or be a certain skin color, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, all those things, where if you call it what it is, again, I'm coming back to that title, you're calling a spade a spade. I'm not going to pretend that I'm something else. This is a really challenging topic for so many people for so many reasons. And having worked again with the student that I was talking about earlier, it just has made me think about this topic. And I know that for some people, this is really challenging. So no matter what your opinions are, whether you agree with me or not, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I have to say on the subject. And it is rambly because that's how these kind of stream of consciousness videos tend to go. But thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, queries, theories, ideas, or anything else, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. And I will see you soon. Peace.